The first is judicial diversity. Basically what the bench looks like, what the people who are judges, what the people sitting on the bench when the court look like. And that's important, I would submit, because when somebody walks into court, it can be disconcerting to think that the person sitting in the black robe at the top of the bench looks just like me every single time as a white man. There's a lot of room for improvement with respect to the representational diversity of the court system. The second topic I'd like to talk about tonight is judicial selection. And this touches on issues relating to systems of appointing judges versus electing judges, and what the pros and cons of are for each of those types of systems. One of the issues that stems from judicial selection is the issue of judicial recusal. That is when it's inappropriate for judges to hear certain cases. That's sort of the back-end process. You know, the selection has to do with how judges get there onto the bench, and then recusal has to do with under what circumstances they should not hear particular cases. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of my presentation tonight. So turning first to the issue of judicial diversity. This is a topic we heard a lot about over the summer with the Sotomayor nomination, for the obvious reason, I suppose, that she is, as it turns out, the first Latina to ever serve on the United States Supreme Court, and only the third woman in the several hundred years of history. It's interesting that this is the first moment that we've had a female Latina on the bench of the Supreme Court, because while we recognize that when a citizen goes into court, whether for a criminal case or whether case between two people or a person and a company, they're entitled to a jury of their peers, and that jury is drawn from a pool that is representative of the community in which that person lives. That's a basic fundamental value in the American legal system. But unfortunately, while the jury is required to be reflective of the community as a whole, all too often the person sitting on the bench is not also required to have that characteristic. There's often a predictable presence on the bench, as I said, somebody that looks like me, a white male. White men are still, to this day, disproportionately represented on the courts. And part of that is just a product of history. Part of that is the fact that the legal profession for a long time was an old boys club. And that's changing now. In the law schools, in the legal profession as a whole, we're seeing more diversity. More women are practicing as lawyers, more female law students. In fact, the law students now are slightly, by a slight majority, are predominantly female. And there are also more attorneys of color, more minorities that are practicing law. So there's every reason that diversity will increase as we move forward, but perhaps the courts haven't quite caught up to the rest of the system yet. As I said, Justice Sotomayor is the first Latina to serve on the Supreme Court. The other federal courts are also disproportionately white, disproportionately male. For example, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers states like Minnesota and a number of other Midwestern states, has, out of 11 judges, one woman. She's the only woman ever to serve on the Eighth Circuit. There's only been one in several hundred years of history. And she's actually the 10th oldest judge on the court, which is to say there are 11 judges. She was appointed 10 judges ago, and 9 additional judges have been appointed since she was placed on the bench. Every one of those has been a man. She's soon going to retire, and unless any other women are appointed in the next few years, we will go back to seeing the Eighth Circuit being an all-male bench. I would suggest that when you talk about public confidence in the court system, a court system, a judiciary that looks a bit more like America looks, will, in many parts of the community, engender greater confidence. Now that's the federal court system. State courts, as many of you may know, are where the majority of the action is. The vast percentage of cases that end up in court end up in state court. And state courts, the story is the same, if not in some cases worse. White men are overrepresented in state courts by large margins. The state appellate courts, they are overrepresented on average by 2 to 1. But that, of course, that aggregate figure doesn't capture some of the individual states and what we see happening there. Let me just give you two examples. Arizona is a state that is 40% non-white. So 2 out of every 5 people living in Arizona is not white. On the Supreme Court in Arizona, there's not a single judge that isn't white. So 40% of the public and 0% of the Supreme Court judges. Rhode Island is another state, 21% non-white population, but again, no minority judges on the Supreme Court. And on the Superior Court, the trial court in Rhode Island, again, 21% non-white, only 1 judge out of 22 Superior Court judges is not white. Now again, these are trends that in many ways reflect historical characteristics of the legal profession. There's every reason to think that these will change moving forward. But of course, states can do things to make things change faster or let things change more slowly. And I would urge that it's vitally important for states to take actions that will help to reverse these trends. Now let's talk about New Jersey briefly for a second. New Jersey is certainly not the worst in terms of diversity. New Jersey is in many ways ahead of many of its sister states. On the Supreme Court here in the state, there are 7 judges. 3 of them are women. 1 is an African American and 1 is a Latino. So 3 out of 7 judges are women, nearly 50% female judges on the Supreme Court in New Jersey. Similarly, on the Intermediate Appellate Court in New Jersey, 15 out of 34 judges are women. So certainly women are represented here in New Jersey in better numbers than they are in many places. People of color, minority judges are represented less frequently. There is certainly room for improvement there. Only 2 African American and 2 Latino judges serve out of all the 34 judges on the intermediate courts. And at the basic level, the trial level, the lowest level of courts here in New Jersey, the numbers are even worse. There are 371, nearly 400 judges. Only 85 of those are women. So at the trial court level, fewer than 1 in 4 judges are women, and the numbers are even much less for African American and Latino judges. So New Jersey, again, is certainly not by any stretch the most egregious offender, but it's also not at the top of the class, and there is a lot that can be done to improve the diversity and the representation of other communities within the judicial system. Now, the Brennan Center, I believe in January this year, earlier this year at any rate, we put out a report. It's called Improving Judicial Diversity, and it looks at some of the most egregious states. We looked at 10 states, and we examined the state court systems there and what the numbers were, and we talked to judges, members of nominating commissions, and those sorts of people to figure out what could be done, why these trends existed, what could be done to improve the representation of other communities in the court system. And we came up with a series of recommendations. I would urge any of you that are interested, I didn't have a chance to bring copies of the report for everyone that's here tonight, but it's available on our website. You can just download it for free if you look it up, and certainly if any of you would like for me to send you a copy of the report, I'd be happy to do that. I won't get into going through and the laundry list of every single recommendation we made in that report, but I would just highlight a couple of the things that can bring awareness to the importance of diversity and also help to improve the number of women and minority lawyers that get appointed to the courts. Many states have had success by appointing commissions that will sort of screen and evaluate the qualifications of applicants to be judges. These commissions can be charged specifically with looking at the qualifications of female and minority candidates, and that can be an effective mechanism. Appointing a diversity ombudsman, somebody to look at this specifically and make recommendations. Particularly states where the governor appoints judges, having advisory bodies to weigh in on the governor's process so that other candidates that may not always be considered have a fair shake can be important proposals. And we can look, one thing I've thought is a possible area to look is surprisingly perhaps the National Football League, which has a policy called the Rooney Rule, which says that any team owner who wants to hire a coach before they make any hire has to interview candidates